Scientists spent 70 long years trying to prove that the Yeti does not exist. But in the end, they used modern DNA technology to trap themselves in a complete and terrifying dead end. It wasn't because they failed to find any evidence. It was because none of the evidence they actually found could provide an answer that would let the scientific community rest easy. The mystery truly began in the year 1951. A famous British mountaineer named Eric Shipton was exploring the treacherous Menlung Glacier in the Himalayas. High up in the death zone, he captured a photograph that would shock the world. It showed a clear trail of massive footprints pressed deep into the endless snow. These footprints were a staggering 33 centimeters wide, and the creature's stride spanned over 1.5 meters. Shipton placed his ice axe right next to one of the tracks to serve as a scale. When the photograph was sent back to London and published on the front page of the Times, it caused an immediate global sensation. To this very day, that photograph has never been given an official, universally accepted explanation by the scientific world.
Decades passed, and the legends grew. Then, in 2013, a renowned geneticist from Oxford University, Professor Brian Sykes, decided to settle the debate once and for all. He issued a public, worldwide appeal, asking anyone holding suspected Yeti hair samples to step forward. The response was overwhelming. He received 36 unique samples coming from more than 30 different countries. But when the DNA results finally came out of the sequencing machines, the entire laboratory fell into a dead, horrified silence. 2 of those mysterious hair samples contained a genetic sequence that pointed directly to an ancient species of polar bear that lived at least 40,000 years ago. According to every single modern biology textbook on Earth, this prehistoric beast should have been completely extinct for millennia. Yet the hair samples collected from the mountains were completely fresh.
What made it even more impossible to explain was the geography. One of these terrifying samples came from the western side of the Himalayas, while the other was found on the eastern side, more than 40 kilometers away. 2 completely unrelated people living in separate mountain valleys had encountered the exact same, supposedly extinct prehistoric beast in the exact same year. For centuries, the Sherpa people, the Tibetans, and the mountain residents of Bhutan, 3 distinct groups who never had deep cultural exchanges, all shared identical descriptions of this creature in their local languages. They all described a massive body, the ability to walk perfectly upright, and a piercing, pungent odor. Their descriptions matched word for word. This is not something that can be dismissed as a simple fairy tale or a shared myth. Legends do not possess the magical ability to fly across the brutal ridges of the Himalayan mountain range. So what exactly is it? Is it the surviving remnant of a species thought long dead? Or is it a completely new, massive creature that modern science has failed to discover? To find the answer, we have to look at how many times the scientific community has seriously investigated this creature. The truth is, they took it far more seriously than you might think. On May 29, 1953, Sir Edmund Hillary and his Sherpa guide, Tenzing Norgay, successfully reached the summit of Mount Everest, making history. But very few people know that during their historic climb up the icy slopes, this very same team discovered a trail of giant footprints. Hillary documented the event himself, noting that the tracks likely belonged to a massive primate or an unknown animal. This discovery haunted Hillary so deeply that less than 6 months after standing on top of the world, in December 1953, he organized a brand new expedition to return to the Himalayas. This time, his sole mission was to hunt down whatever had left those giant tracks. Even the man who conquered the highest peak on Earth could not simply close his eyes to those footprints.
This event sent shockwaves through the global exploration community.
In 1954, the British Daily Mail newspaper funded a massive, heavily equipped search party. The team included mountaineers, expert zoologists, and professional photographers. They searched the brutal terrain of the Himalayas for months. While they never captured a living Yeti, they brought back a massive collection of footprint records and hair samples. Those hairs were locked away in museum archives, sitting in the dark for over 60 years. No one truly knew what was hidden inside those boxes.
That was until the year 2017. A brilliant biologist named Professor Charlotte Lindquist from the State University of New York at Buffalo decided to unearth the truth. She gathered every single suspected Yeti specimen held by global museums and private collectors. Bones, teeth, skin, hair, and even feces. 9 critical samples in total. She subjected them to full mitochondrial DNA genome sequencing. When the final data rolled in, everyone was left completely stunned. Out of the 9 Holy Grail samples, 8 turned out to be bears. Specifically, they belonged to 3 different types of bears native to the region: the Asian black bear, the Tibetan brown bear, and the rare Himalayan brown bear. The very last sample belonged to a dog. But the most heartbreaking and mind-boggling revelation came from a specimen sourced from a remote monastery in Nepal. For generations, the monks had deeply worshipped a sacred relic.
a mummified hand believed to belong to a Yeti. The DNA test proved it was actually just a fragment of skin from an Asian black bear. A bear's claw had been revered as a holy miracle for countless years, never questioned and never tested until modern science stepped in.
However, Professor Lindquist openly admitted that her research could only answer what those specific collected samples were. It could absolutely not answer the ultimate question: what on earth created those massive footprints in the first place? Because of this, zoologists came up with a fascinating new hypothesis. They suggested that what eyewitnesses were seeing was likely the Himalayan brown bear. This specific bear has a hidden, lesser-known behavioral trait. When it needs to scan the horizon for distant danger, or when it is trying to minimize resistance while wading through deep, heavy snow, it will choose to stand and walk entirely on its hind legs. Remarkably, it can sustain this upright walk for incredibly long distances. Just picture this image in your mind: a vast, endless landscape of white snow, the dim, fading light of twilight. Through the freezing mist, a towering, heavily furred silhouette stands straight up, slowly moving across the slopes. If you were an isolated mountain herder traveling alone with zero training in advanced zoology, what would your mind tell you were looking at?
Yet, even this rational explanation has a massive flaw that it cannot escape. After completing his landmark study in 2013, Professor Sykes left the world with a haunting statement. He said it is almost a certainty that there is still a massive, completely unrecognized animal species roaming the hidden valleys of the Himalayas. He pointed out that the polar bear is the only bear species on Earth that will actively and intentionally hunt human trackers. If a close, ice-dwelling relative of the polar bear truly exists high in the Himalayas, it perfectly explains why every single historical witness described the creature as incredibly aggressive and predatory. It behaves completely unlike any normal brown or black bear. Furthermore, Lindquist's DNA research accidentally uncovered an even bigger scientific bombshell. Through full mitochondrial sequencing, her team discovered that the brown bears living on the Tibetan Plateau and those living in the western Himalayas were completely cut off from each other 650,000 years ago during a massive ice age. Separated by expanding glaciers, these two groups evolved completely independently, forming entirely distinct genetic markers.
Think about that timeline for a moment. 650,000 years. That is more than 3 times longer than modern Homo sapiens have even walked the surface of the Earth. These apex predators have been quietly evolving in total isolation amidst the ice for over 500,000 years. And to this day, modern science has never even managed to conduct a complete population count of them. If a known animal can hide and evolve right under our noses for 650,000 years without us fully understanding it, how can anyone boldly claim to know exactly what does or does not exist in the deep wild? The monks who lovingly wrapped that bear claw and placed it on their altar hundreds of years ago were not foolish. They simply came face to face with a terrifying entity they had never seen before. Lacking satellite maps and genetic labs, they used the only language and concepts they had to explain the grand unknown. This is the most primal, beautiful instinct of humanity when confronting the darkness. Today, we possess DNA sequencing, satellite arrays, and precision tracking equipment. Yet, when we stand before the sheer cold mass of the Himalayas, we are standing in the exact same spot as those ancient monks. The legend of the Yeti was never just a cheesy story about a mountain monster. It is a story about humanity standing at the sharp boundary of its own knowledge, feeling terrified, feeling utterly mesmerized, yet completely unable to stop themselves from taking just one more step forward into the dark. That boundary is still there, waiting for the next explorer to draw close.